You're listening to the Huddle Up Podcast with Chad Jensen and Zack Kelberman. Join Broncos Country's deep divers at milehighhuddle.com and sound off. And now it's time to drop some knowledge.
All right, we're live. We got to let the screen breathe just for a moment. You all know how we do here on the Huddle Up Podcast. We got to bring in Facebook here. Bear with us just one moment. And we are good. Welcome in, everybody, to the Huddle Up Podcast, presented, as always, by Mile High Huddle, empowered by Overtime Media. I'm your host, Chad Jensen. With me, as always, my partner in crime. You know him. You love him. He's Zack Kelberman. Zack, we heard not too long before we went live here this evening that the Minnesota Vikings personnel guy who's getting a lot of looks around the league for the GM openings, George Paton, we since learned, of course, that it's not Paton. It is only one T, so it does make sense that it's Paton, not Paton. He pulled out of the consideration for the Carolina Panthers opening. He was going to interview, pulled out because he wants to kind of focus on the Denver Broncos. Could this be John Elway, Joe Ellis, Vic Fangio, Patrick Smythe? Could this be their guy?
Could be, and it's definitely a positive sign. If anyone's followed George Paton over the years, he's been in high demand as a potential GM candidate, and he's turned down, I wrote a story about him, several interviews over the course of the last 3 to 4 years. So just the fact that Broncos are getting an interview is an important detail here, and it's something that should be celebrated. In terms of the other candidates, Chad, I think it's funny that we haven't heard about Adam Peters so much, and you mentioned Carolina. I think that's where he's going to go. There's some rumblings there. It's always the musical chairs. Wherever one goes, another opens up. George Paton is my number 2, though, behind Terry Fontenot. If they can get one or the two, I would be over the moon. This guy has scouting chops. He has free agent scouting chops. He's been in the game, around some of the best coaches and front office execs in the NFL. I would love this hire by Denver.
So let me just read a few quick cliff notes here for those of you trying to play catch up, because, you know, it's not easy for fans to know the names and the bios of every single, I don't want to say subordinate, but, lower level personnel guys. Fans are often quite aware of who the GMs are for each and every team in the league, but some of their underlings and assistants in the personnel departments are kind of nameless. So let's talk about George Paton here. This is his bio. Entering the 2019 season. So this would say then, if we were to make it current, George Paton completed his 14th season with the Vikings in 2020 as the assistant GM, working under Rick Spielman, and the duo of Spielman and Paton, according to this article or this bio, this resume on the Vikings website, have a long professional history together, having worked on the personnel staffs in Chicago and Miami before joining forces again in Minnesota. Here we go. The 2012 Vikings benefited from an influx of young talent and spurred the squad. Some flexing, blah, blah, blah. Vikings landed, flex. Give me something interesting. This is not as good as the Terry Fontenot resume on Saints.com. I'm looking here. Here. Let me get back to Paton. Here's a lot of flexing here. We don't really care about that. Paton's primary focus is to coordinate scouting and personnel functions with the Vikings pro scouting department and lend his expertise to the college scouting department as they prepare for the annual NFL draft. Paton spent 6 seasons with the Dolphins as the director of pro personnel. Paton began his NFL career in the college and pro scouting departments of the Bears, rising to the position of assistant director of pro personnel in 2000. And then it goes into some of his collegiate history. So not quite as detailed resume on Paton's part, but he's an interesting guy. I'll tell you this, Zach. For me, it would still be Fontenot, then it would be Champ Kelly, and then probably this guy, even because it doesn't appear that Adam Peters is really on the radar for the Broncos.
It's weird. Yeah, we all thought he would be the front runner, and they haven't even put in an interview for him yet. And based on what we know, I would really like Paton a lot. I don't know how much interest he has about taking the job or how much interest the Broncos have of hiring him. I think it's still going to be Champ Kelly. I think he is the presumptive favorite. I would love Terry Fontenot, but George Paton as well. He is so well respected around the NFL. If you ask any evaluator, scouting director, talent man, executive. They all rave about him. And like I mentioned, he's turned down so many interviews over the course of the last several seasons. For the Broncos to even get him in the door, I think is a good indication of where they are as a franchise.
Let's talk just for a moment, and then we'll segue into some other topics here about why Champ Kelly makes so much sense for the Broncos. Now, we understand that oftentimes with our audience, I think the majority of our great audience is with us each and every episode, but sometimes people pop in the middle of an episode, they miss the beginning, or they missed the previous episode or whatever. So let's just back up for a second. Cliff Notes style. We're not going to recapitulate everything here, but Champ Kelly is a phenomenal, and he's going to be a highly sought after GM candidate. But the reason why, aside from all of his accomplishments in the league, that he is so attractive and obvious as a Broncos candidate here is not only the fact that he worked under John Elway in the past and a previous regime as well in Denver, but also that when he went to Chicago, Zach, he worked with Vic Fangio as the defensive coordinator. So we don't know, we're not flies on the wall in Chicago, obviously, but we can safely assume that Vic Fangio is well acquainted with Kelly, has probably sat in a lot of meetings with him in terms of pre-draft and then, roster calculations as far as shaping the final 53 and practice squads. Because, these personnel guys, as they're making their recommendations to the GM, they do consult with the coaches to kind of see what their take and view is on certain guys on the roster in terms of, hey, do you have we really like this guy. We see something long-term, but do you even see a role? I mean, how are you viewing him right now? These conversations take place, especially at different times during the, different parts of the NFL calendar. But Champ Kelly is a very, very intriguing candidate, Zach. And I think there's, for those reasons, he's probably, if we were putting money on it, he's probably the most likely guy to get the job. Yeah. And I would be happy with it. But Paton does intrigue me. And I can pull up Fontenot again for those who might have missed what we talked about yesterday.
Yeah, I think we differ slightly. I mean, I wouldn't cry if Kelly is the hire. He just doesn't impress me the way Fontenot or George Paton does. And, when you consider his tenure with the Bears, they've been a decently well-drafted team. They've done well scouting and finding those players. But Champ Kelly was part of the faction that did not even speak to Deshaun Watson in the pre-draft process in 2017, Chad. They did not even pay him a visit, make a phone call, an interview. They took Trubisky at number 2 overall. I have to kind of question, when the Broncos are afflicted with their young quarterback right now, which direction they want to go in. Do I really want the guy who took or pined for or pushed for or catalyzed the fact that Trubisky was the number 2 pick over Deshaun Watson? That is where my bone of contention comes in.
Yep, and it's definitely a concern, right? It's a little bit of a red flag. I mean, I think it's going to be difficult for the Broncos parsing through these different resumes to identify the perfect resume with 0 red flags in terms of past personnel or draft decisions. But I'm with you on that because obviously they missed the boat. I mean, Patrick Mahomes is the crown jewel of that class, but nevertheless, Deshaun Watson, who we're going to talk a little bit about here tonight, here in just a few minutes, is easily the runner-up there. And Trubisky's not even in the same stratosphere. I mean,
universe.
Yeah, I mean, they're way up here. First of all, Mahomes way up here. I'll say Watson somewhere in here, and then Trubisky way down here, he's playing at Jag level, right? He's replacement level quarterback, with the exception of that one great year the Bears had, Fangio's last year there in 2018. But that push into the playoffs, Zach, was fueled by Fangio's defense, not so much, obviously, Mitch Trubisky and the offense for the Bears.
Well, the Bears have been kind of in quarterback purgatory as well. They failed with Trubisky. Then they went after Nick Foles. He was kind of a bust investment or an acquisition. And I don't want to be stuck doing the same, beating my head against the wall with quarterbacks like we've done the past 5 years. That's why I wanted someone like Fontenot, who, despite having Drew Brees, they drafted Taysom Hill, or someone like Adam Peters, who came from an organization that developed young quarterbacks. That's my only, or one of my major gripes with Kelly. I just, the Trubisky thing just sets me off.
All right, we'll get more into Fontenot. We'll get into the stuff, the rumors, I should say, about what's going on with Deshaun Watson, because it has now taken on more momentum. There's been more things that have come out that I want to touch base on than just Mike Florio floating that there's a possibility that Deshaun Watson could request a trade. I mean, we'll get into that. But, Zach, to me at this stage, I just want to throw this out real quick, have you address it, and then we'll get into some quick matters of business, dive right back in. But to me, I just can't fathom the Houston Texans trading their number one asset. And I know he's not happy, and we'll get into that. And I understand that he could try and force the issue, but he doesn't have all that much leverage considering the fact that his contract is north of $100 million in terms of guaranteed money. He wants to get that money. So I don't know. Well, just on the surface, while I pull up a couple last things and we'll dive in, your quick reaction to this rumor.
I'm with you. I don't think he gets traded. I think this was media conjecture, and there was a rumor that Watson is unhappy about the GM search. He wasn't briefed on them hiring Nick Caserio. And there's always the chance, Chad, like we mentioned about the Broncos, of a new guy coming in who has no loyalty to the current personnel. They could trade Deshaun Watson, but Bill O'Brien not being there anymore, making those idiotic, boneheaded trades, that kind of tempered expectations on trading Deshaun Watson, who's a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. No matter what GM you have, you keep a building block like that around. And I don't know the Broncos would surrender the capital it would take to acquire him, nor consume his contract in a blockbuster trade like that.
I'm trying to find this tweet that here we go. Let's see.
No, D Brown, I would not take Locke over Watson. Watson's a top 5 guy, big Locke fan, but I got to call a spade a spade. Watson is a baller.
All right, guys, we're going to get way into the weeds on this, so bear with us here while we go through some quick matters of business, starting with a tip of the cap to the sponsor of tonight's live stream podcast, sportsbetting.com. You all know that gambling is legal in the state of Colorado, and if you're looking to make your favorite sports, watching your favorite sports a little bit more interesting, you got to use sportsbetting.com in the same way that fantasy football has made our favorite sports or fantasy sports all the more interesting. The same goes for the proliferation and rise of online sports gambling, and sportsbetting.com is right at the forefront of that. And here's why. You get sharp odds, you get low juice. They have their own in-house bookmakers, which means they're not a third-party provider of odds. In fact, Zach and I, we get emails that have lists of the different odds for different prop bets that they manufacture themselves. They're not pulling them from around the internet. And, it's been interesting to see how those prop bets shake out and how they kind of view things. And, we've built stories around some of them, including the fact that their odds had Drew Lock before John Elway stepped up, right? Let's just say relinquished the GM duties. Before he did that, sportsbetting.com's odds makers had Drew Lock at about a 60% chance of being the day one starter at quarterback in 2021. Plus, you get hassle-free bonuses, which you can roll over after one time compared to some of the other sites out there that make you bet it 5 to 30 times before you can access that money, and 24/7 live customer support, always a real person in the US of A. But the kicker is this. Here's where you want to pay close attention. After you make your first deposit, sportsbetting.com will match it up to $750. That's $750 in free bet credits. Plus, right now you got the NBA tipped off. The season's rolling. You'll also get $25 in free bet credits for the NBA. So head on over to sportsbetting.com/milehighhuddle. That is sportsbetting.com/milehighhuddle and capitalize on up to $750 in free bet credits. And gang, start 2021 off on the right foot. All right, a couple other quick things here and we'll dive right back in. Follow the pod on Twitter @HuddleUpPod, the main account @MileHighHuddle. My partner, Zack Kelberman, as you can see on the screen here, @Kelberman NFL, myself, @Chad and Jensen. Also, a gentle reminder to check out the merch store. Get yourself one of these hoodies, get a hat, a T-shirt, a mug, face mask. Rep the brand, help us grow it. It's another way to support what we're doing here at MHH. Also, shout out to those of you who have just flowed over to Facebook to become official supporters, because we are rolling out the new show that is going to be only for the Facebook supporters. Starting on Sunday, Kelberman's Corner, some hot takes. It's going to be a little bit different flavor than what everyone's used to seeing here on our nightly live stream podcast. So if you want to support what we're doing, get access to that content, go to facebook.com/milehighhuddle. You'll see the big blue button that says become an official supporter. boom, you're in like Flynn. And if you're not in a position to patronize the merch store or become a supporter or Super Chat superstar, we are, believe it, grateful that you're here with us, whether you're listening live with us live or after the fact as an on-demand pod. We do ask, though, that you get involved in these 3 ways. This is within the power of each and every listener in our community. Number 1, subscribe. Number 2, like this video, which is crucial on YouTube and Facebook. And the number 3 is the litmus test to let us know, to let Zach and I know if we are doing a good job for you. Share it out there. If you think we're up to snuff, share this video, share this podcast episode out there. Help us continue to grow and reach new like-minded Broncos fans just like you.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
All right, Zach, since we don't have John, who is still on vacation, he'll be on vacation for a few more days. I'm going to quickly grab 1 or 2 super chats here. And hello to everybody that's been hanging out in the chat. I mean, there's a nice little conversation going, it looks like here, Zach, well before we kicked off the pod. So it's good to see everybody in the room. We appreciate you. Rod TV, he says, and thank you for the super chat, my friend. And by the way, Rod, if you're on Twitter, make sure you connect with Zach and I. Let us know who you are so that we can follow back and keep the conversation going outside of these live streams. But he says, I would give up 5 first-round picks and send Tim Patrick, Philip Lindsay, and Graham Glasgow for Deshaun Watson. Zach, I'm not on board. I can't do it. I mean, first of all, just no, I can't do it. I wouldn't do it.
That might not be enough, honestly. I mean, he's an elite top 5 quarterback in his prime right now. I mean, it would take the farm, it would take the land the farm is built on, it would take the surrounding cities, it would take everything to get Deshaun Watson out of Houston. And when you start to look at that kind of capital in those terms, is it really worth it? And we'll get more into it in a second about Watson and these rumors and why I don't think it's going to happen, but it's just too much, Chad, to wager on a quarterback. And he goes, one bad hit, God forbid, one bad hit, and let's say his career is affected or his season's over, all that capital, all those picks, poof.
Yes, indeed. And Benjamin Albright, who is KOA, Broncos Country Tonight, very plugged in with NFL sources in front offices around the league. He checked in on this as a possibility after the rumors started going, and this is what he tweeted earlier today, quote, "The Texans aren't trading Deshaun Watson, nor has that been discussed. I asked for a hypothetical offer that might move him last night. Response, 3 firsts, 3 seconds, and a player might start the conversation," close quote. So I'm telling you right now, if that's what it would take to land Deshaun Watson, gang, do you really want to saddle your Denver Broncos with no first, second round picks for the next 3 to 4 years? I mean, think about it. Because as much as I like Deshaun Watson, don't get me wrong, I do think he's a phenomenal quarterback. I mean, we could sit here and pick nits and argue and debate who the top 5 young QBs in the league are. And he would definitely be up there. All right. But look, was he able to overcome all the roster holes and coaching foibles in Houston let's just say this year? I know last year they made the playoffs, won the AFC South, but look at this season. He, by virtue of his own formidable talents, he could not raise the ships around him to a point where the Texans could compete because there are so many roster holes. Now, you can argue and say, Chad, the Broncos have a better roster. When they get healthy, they have more pieces in place than what the Texans have now. Thus, they're not going to be, if you were to land him in a trade, as dependent on these future draft picks. But I would beg to differ with that perspective because I do think, especially on the defensive side, they still have some pretty serious holes to fill. And maybe they could do a lot of that filling in free agency and down the road. But I can't get on board with giving up the farm as good as he is. I just can't do it. Plus, you still have the possibility, and I don't mean to compare Watson with Drew Lock because Drew Lock is nowhere close to being anywhere as proven as Watson. You still have the possibility of Drew Lock becoming a bona fide franchise quarterback if you continue to put in the TLC, the time, the effort to develop him. You got all those live rep bullets this year, 5 games last year. You want to see what you've got in that.
Yeah, and obviously I think he has the edge to remain the incumbent. I can't really speak too much of it from Houston's point of view. I don't cover the Texans. I'm not too plugged in with what their thinking might be. I know with Bill O'Brien not there anymore, it's less and less of a possibility they give away their cornerstone franchise player. I'm looking at it from the Broncos' point of view, and I was going to tweet this, and I still might, but the first order of business for the new GM is his first move going to be to mortgage the future of the franchise for the next decade. Do you really think that would be his first move without a CEO in place next year, with no ownership chat in place, and a lame duck head coach for 2021? Is that really the type of franchise-altering move you think would happen in practicality? We're all fantasizing about it. We all want it to happen. We all drool at the thought of Deshaun Watson throwing to Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy and Noah Fant and KJ Hamler. It would be amazing. But we don't live in Madden. Things have consequences here, and things have rules, and things don't always go out the way things should go. You know, Watson would be a great player for Denver, but why would the Texans trade him? And really, the new GM, or whoever's running the Broncos this season and beyond, would that move really be worth it? Would they give up the compensation needed? Because Albright's probably right. I mean, it's going to take at least 3 first-round picks. So you're at least, and you're talking about not picking in the first round for 3 years, not reloading the core of your team for at least 3 years. I can't see the new GM, especially if it's someone like Champ Kelly, who's never held a job before, that being his first move, a blockbuster trade in reality.
I want to grab this from Based Gase, but first, real quick, before I forget, I don't want to forget this. We got to tip our cap to the champion of the MHH Fantasy Football League, Scott Sheffield. Hey, man, good job. Congrats to you. Way to vanquish all competition in the league this year. So tip your cap to Scott Sheffield. What was the name of his team again, Zach?
I was going to tip my cap to his team name, which has never been Clist. And I thought that was a great play on words with our dear friend Mike Clist. But Scott, great job this year. Your hoodie is on the way, well deserved. We said we'd shout you out, so congrats and keep going. Repeat next year.
All right, Base Gaze, appreciate the super chat, my friend. He says, give Houston whatever they want. An all-pro quarterback hitting his prime. He's only a year older than Locke, for what it's for your information. Yeah, I feel you. I mean, in a perfect world, as I wrote about today, who wouldn't want Deshaun Watson as their quarterback? But again, you come back to the point of diminishing returns when you realize that you got to sell the farm. You would literally have to just hope and pray, because it's not just the compensation to get him in terms of what you have to give up to the Texans, but you would also, Zach, have to factor in that his cap hit in 2021 is not quite as cumbersome, but starting in 22 and beyond, you're talking north of $30 million per season. So that becomes another issue, because if you're selling the farm in terms of your draft position in the premium rounds for the next 3 years minimum, you're going to need your cap space to compete and rebuild the defense. Look, you can make the argument that the offense is locked, loaded, ready to go. All it would need is a guy, a playmaker like Watson to shoot it into the stratosphere. And I wouldn't disagree. I think you're right. And that's why we need to see Drew Lock turn a corner. And if not, time to find somebody else. But the defense, Zach, there are some serious holes on that Broncos defense, starting with the defensive line. You don't know what's going to happen with Shelby. You don't know what's going to happen with DeMarcus Walker, who's probably going to be gone. Draymond, he's an up-and-comer. I think you'll see a massive quantum leap from him in year 3 in 2021, but you have an unsettled D-line. Mike Purcell will be back, but he's coming off an injury. You don't have that other starting spot locked down. Plus, your off-ball linebackers could use a significant upgrade. It sure would be nice to draft one in the first round like we've been talking about, don't you think? Plus, at cornerback, the only guy you really have to hang your hat on is Bryce Callahan. He's a guy that you can't trust completely because of health. Michael Ojemudia, he showed some strong signs this season, Zach, but he's still got quite a ways to go. Definitely the best third-round corner the Broncos have drafted when we're comparing him to the likes of Isaac Yiadom and Brendan Langley. But nevertheless, then you still have questions at safety because you don't know what's going on with Simmons, especially with the new GM coming in. And Kareem, those teeth got real long, all right? It started coming out in the wash. So that's why I'm saying, man, in that case, if you did bring Deshaun Watson in under those circumstances, Zach, you would have no choice but to figure out how to build those holes, or fill those holes, I should say, through free agency, basically, and taking flyers on guys in the mid to late rounds.
And if they're going to hire a director of scouting, those guys don't build through free agency. They build through the draft. So it would fly in the face of their natural tendencies. And Chad, you nailed it perfectly. One of my points was that I want to tweet about, or I'll get to it eventually. The Broncos are not, compared to some other teams that would be interested in him, they're not a Deshaun Watson away from winning a title. And I hate to break that to you guys, but they're not. They're not a quarterback away. They have holes throughout the team. And let me tell you something else. Beyond any roster hole, you know what the Broncos have that's the bigger issue? His name is Pat Shurmur. You're going to take Deshaun Watson and put him with Pat Shurmur? That's a disaster waiting to happen. 5 first-round picks. Okay, let's say 3 first-round picks, couple second-rounders, whatever it takes to get him. You're going to keep him with Pat Shurmur together. It's oil and water. It's not going to happen, Chad. I really firmly believe it's not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, Houston just doesn't seem to be in any kind of headspace to trade him. I want to get to an Ian Rappaport tweet here in just a moment to give us a little more context here, but let's grab a couple supers that have stacked up because people have been patient. We love each and every one of you, so let's get to a few here. Blue Raw, who we also know as Chris on Twitter, he says, and thank you for the super chat, Chris. He says, cheers. Not much, but it'll get you started. Really appreciate that, Chris. For real, my friend. Also, we've got MHH Male Model, Muhammad, jumping in. Appreciate that, brother. He says, we are live. Yes, indeed. Sorry, we got to go on the back end to grab the supers because the chat was moving so quickly and my stream jumped. So apologize for not being able to flash everyone's individual card, but we're still getting the comment here. So appreciate you, Muhammad, my friend. Good to see you. Also, we got Steve Baumgartner in the house. Good to see you, my brother, as well. He says, hey, guys. And then we also got foundational super chat superstar here at MHH in this community, Zeus McPeak. Really appreciate that, brother. He says, Broncos, let's get the GM position right. And that has to be the first focus, Zach. We can sit here and talk about, sugar plum fairies and the idea of landing a Deshaun Watson and all that. But first and foremost on the plate today is make the right hire. And that is probably what should really be consuming our conversation.
Yeah, you got to you can't put the cart before the horse, so they say. And trying to land a franchise quarterback like Deshaun Watson without a GM in place, it's mental and verbal masturbation right now. We should not just be seriously consumed with that until the Broncos have a GM in place. At least we know what their tendencies are. If it's a GM that has veteran experience, and if they want Deshaun Watson, what came to me earlier, Chad, why not interview Rick Smith, who literally traded up for Watson in Houston in 2017? He was his GM. Not the guy who passed on Watson in Champ Kelly and took Trubisky over him. So the GM has to fall in place first. Absolutely.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
All right, let me just read this interesting context from Rap Sheet from Ian Rappaport. Quote, Texans quarterback Deshaun Watson is extremely unhappy with the organization after owner Cal McNair informed him he would be involved in the GM and coach hiring process and provide feedback, but then did neither in the hire of GM Nick Caserio, sources say. So where did all this blustering come from? Watson was promised he would have a say in these momentous organizational decisions, starting with the GM and the head coach, and he was not. So he was basically lied to or led on by Cal McNair. And so this is, I think, his way of saying, look, you brought in Caserio, whoever you were going to bring on the head coach, you better have me involved in that or else I'm going to make a lot of headaches for you, my friend.
And it's weird because I don't see him like that. I don't see him as a disruptor. I don't see him as being this outspoken cancer type player. And yeah, if they made him some considerations or a deal privately and it didn't go that way, that's certainly a sore spot for him. But I don't think anything that's going to precipitate his trading from Houston, Chad. I think it's a major leap to assume he's going to be traded because of that.
Definitely. All right, we got another super here from Josh Johnson. Good to see you, my brother. He says, Watson won't be our quarterback. Paton won't be GM. Vic won't just get demoted to defensive coordinator. I don't mean to be negative, but Lord, LOL, Paton or Fontenot for me, please. Yeah, I mean, it's fun to speculate and it's fun to dream and whatnot, but we want to keep it within the realm of the plausible, within the realm of the attainable. And who's to say that Deshaun Watson, it doesn't continue to spiral and get worse, and the Texans do consider moving him. But right now, what we're hearing from the insiders plugged in with that particular team, Zach, is that ain't happening.
I was going to say, you're not being negative, you're being realistic. And I agree with every point that you made. Again, the offseason, when we have a GM search or a coaching search or a quarterback search, it's always fun to speculate and fantasize about some guys and some players, but you have to be realistic and understand the way things operate. I'm right there with that comment, 100%.
All right, we also got Lawrence Rivera checking in. It is good to see you, my brother. Thank you for the support. He says, please just pay Watson. I don't care what we got to do. We need the offense rolling again, and this can definitely be the fix. Who's willing to – let me see if that cut him off real quick. Who's willing to restructure? All right, so it's not a matter of paying Watson. Watson just got paid. All right, I can let me pull this up. We can all read along here really quick. I had to do a little research on this myself today. I knew it was a contract north of $100 million, obviously, but – let me see the deets here. 1 second. I know I put it in the article. Bear with me 1 sec here. So his contract is a 4-year extension signed just this past fall, $156 million, $110 million guaranteed. So again, here is the piece to kind of wrap your brain around right here. Could this version of the Broncos, without any first round or second round picks for probably at least the next 3 years, and knowing that to fill those holes, you're going to have to go hard on free agency, could that version of the Broncos absorb a contract, a QB contract north of $30 million per year starting in 2022? No way, in my opinion, Zach. So to me, it really is it's a non-starter at this stage.
At this stage, yeah, but $110 million in guarantees in a year from now, a few years from now, that's going to seem like a steal. I mean, they offered Dak Prescott that last year in guaranteed money. So his contract to me isn't the thing that would prevent me from making this trade. It's the compensation it would take to acquire him from Houston. It's the multiple first round picks. I don't care about the money. I've advocated for the Broncos in a pipe dream scenario to pay Dak Prescott, pay him $40 million a year, but you wouldn't have to trade for him. You wouldn't have to give up 3 or 4 or 5 first round picks. It's just way, way too much for one player.
Levi, good to see you again, my brother. Appreciate you. He says, first, I want the best candidate for GM, but I do want one of color. We need to get more of these talented men, women in these big front office jobs. And that was something, Zach, that CEO, team president Joe Ellis emphasized on Tuesday, that it's very, to quote him, very important to foster and cultivate, do a better job to foster and cultivate diversity in the front office. And he pointed to the fact that, look, our locker room is 75% black. That needs to be reflected up the chain of command more so. And so I don't think it's I was going to say, I don't think it's coincidence that 2 of the key candidates, there's 5 candidates right now on the table that have interviews scheduled. 2 of them are black in Kelly and Fontenot, but those happen to also be my top 2 candidates. I mean, because Adam Peters doesn't seem to be in the equation.
Yeah, they're not I mean, I like Fontenot a lot, but yeah, I happen to think, based on what Ellis was saying, it wasn't pandering. It wasn't just PC speak. I mean, he was saying we have to do a better job and we have to improve hiring more minorities and more black candidates. I really firmly believe the next GM will be black, and it's not based on skin color. It's based on merit. So whether it's Fontenot or Champ Kelly, I do think it'll be one of those guys. That's the direction the Broncos want to go. You can question their motive on that, but these are all qualified candidates, and I do think it will be one of those 2 guys.
Yeah, I mean, it's the stars align perfectly because the 2 guys I like the most, Kelly, Fontenot, they, I think, could do a lot to really help this team. Revan jumping in, Revan 235 on YouTube on Super Chat to say, and by the way, this is the name, Zach, we don't recognize, so welcome. Thank you. He says, hey, gang, my first Super Chat. Is getting Watson even realistic? And if it is, what would we offer? I personally don't see it happening. Yeah, man, look, in the NFL, you've heard me say this before, gang, that I tend to stray away from absolutes because – I've been around long enough, covered the league long enough, covered this team long enough to know that there's nothing new under the sun on one hand, but on the other, it never ceases to surprise me. Just to use a quick anecdote, back in 2012 when the Colts cut Peyton Manning, the Broncos are riding high off Tim Tebow, even though they got embarrassed in the divisional round, that big win against the defending AFC champion Pittsburgh Steelers in the wild card round. And just plus the overall kind of state of the Broncos in terms of they were still very much in the beginning stages of a rebuild themselves. The Elway regime, the Fox regime had just stepped in. And let's face it, Manning was absolutely hated by Broncos fans up until that point because he had been the Bronco killer in the playoffs. Every time the Broncos had faced Peyton Manning, decimated, obliterated. All right. I'm thinking of 2 back-to-back years, 03 and 04 in consecutive seasons. Peyton Manning didn't just bounce the Broncos, Jake Plummer and company, from the playoffs. I mean, he gave him the ultimate wedgie, pulled the underwear up over the head. They couldn't see, then picked him up, tossed him out the building. All right. That was how brutalized the Broncos were by Peyton Manning. And so just all those different factors combined, Zach, I couldn't see him. It didn't even really land on my radar as a possibility. But sure enough, as soon as he hit the open waters of unrestricted free agency and you started to see the suitors take shape, the Broncos it didn't surprise me that the Broncos put in an effort to land him. What surprised me is that he seriously contemplated the Broncos and then, of course, was picked up. So nothing would surprise me, but at the same time, Zach, to answer that was a little long-winded, but for Revan, I don't see it happen. I really don't think at this stage it's a realistic expectation.
Well, people always point to Peyton Manning as the example when to counter the argument, why wouldn't a franchise quarterback, you can acquire one on the open market? The difference is he was a free agent. You didn't have to trade draft picks for him. And let me ask you a question. I can't think of anything on top of my head. Maybe you can, Chad. When's the last time a franchise quarterback in his prime was traded and he went on to having a successful career with his second team? I can't think of any example of that happening. So why would that start with Deshaun Watson?
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
There's probably somebody, maybe Kenneth, if he's in the chat. I haven't seen him yet. He probably
everyone
knows.
I can think of is a free, Breeze, Manning. Those are all, they were signed. They weren't traded.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you're right. It's nothing's coming straight to the fore.
You don't trade those players, regardless of what another team would offer. You don't trade those guys.
Yeah, that's why it really is at this stage. I mean, it's incumbent upon McNair to get with Watson and make him happy, get him involved in what's going on with that head coaching hire now that they've already made the decision on GM. Jesse Randolph jumping in on Super Chat. Thank you, my brother. Appreciate you. He says, just saying, hey, guys, the news never ends, does it? Thanks for keeping me up to date out here in Pattville. All right, in enemy territory out there. Yeah, really appreciate that, Jesse. It's good to see you, my brother. Also, shout out, there's Jeff Green. Everyone knows Jeff. Good to see you, my friend. It's hold on. Bear with me one second here's an actual draft question, which would be off the table if you go out and try and swing a trade that it would take to land Deshaun Watson. Suddenly these aren't even questions that you contemplate because you don't have any first round pick.
Right.
Cody says, pick 9, both available. Micah Parsons or Justin Fields. Zach?
I don't think Fields is going to be there. And God, I don't know. It depends on the GM. One thought that came to me, I'm going to tweet this. If the Broncos did hire Champ Kelly, I mean, he drafted Roquan Smith in Chicago. It may be a new mindset to taking a blue chip inside linebacker. I think that would give them maybe more incentive to draft Micah Parsons too. In a Vic Fangio defense, Chad, we've talked about it before. Inside linebacker is a major need to put him in between Bradley Chubb and a returning Von Miller. Just an all-star pick right there. I would probably take the linebacker, honestly.
Eddie Vasquez, good to see you, my brother. Appreciate you. He says, miss my MHH. Currently working, but I'm here for all the gas. Much love to all you guys and gals. Hashtag hit that like button. Really appreciate that, Eddie. And thanks for not only showing some support, but working us into your life. It's really fun to hear. And it's one of my, it's a spice of what we do, for me anyway, to hear the different ways that our great community works the show into their rhythms and routines in life. So, Eddie, appreciate you making some time for us, bro.
I saw a comment yesterday. I can't remember who it is, so forgive me, but he was saying that he came from the doctor and he was listening to us and it was comforting him and it was soothing. So it's amazing, Chad, the way, we can touch people's lives or the support we have. It blows us away, honestly.
And it's vice versa. I mean, we tried to explain this last night when we opted to go ahead and do the show because you're our escape. We need you guys on the same level. So thank you. Duke Boynton, talk about needing a cat. Got to have some Duke Boynton in your life, all right? This show loves having Duke in the community, and we appreciate that generosity, my brother. Appreciate the super chat. Hope grandbaby is doing okay, by the way. He says, not going to lie, my heart hurts, but you, Chad and Zach, have made life much better. Thank you. I'm assuming that Duke, maybe it's a little bit about what happened with Elway. Maybe it's a little bit about what happened yesterday in our nation's capital. But we feel you, and we love you back, my friend.
And things are getting better. Time heals all. And as this year goes on, we're going to have a much better 21 in every facet, Chad, personally and professionally, football and life, than 2020. So Duke, as we're doing, hang in there. It'll get better. Chin up.
Marcus, continuing to show us some love on Facebook with the stars. So thank you, my friend. Let's grab Josh Trahill with a long one here on Facebook. He says, but the O-line is injury prone. When was the last time our O-line starters finished a whole season together? By the way, that almost never happens in the NFL anymore. It's very rare that a starting O-line stays completely intact and staves off the injury bug for a full season, but I digress. You need to add depth for the O-line or your quarterback is finished. First and a second round draft picks on O-linemen, not third or lower round O-linemen.
It's a good point. And it's one thing Deshaun Watson suffered from up until this season or through this season in Houston, and that's a lack of an offensive line. I mean, we learned this with Locke. It doesn't matter who you have back there if you can't protect him, and that's what we're saying. If you give up the farm and then some, 5 first round, 4 first round, 3 first round, you can't develop the talent around Deshaun Watson. It really handicaps the franchise, as good as he is.
All right, let me see here, guys. Bear with me. This is one of those little lulls where, John would normally have something queued up here. Bear with me 1 second. Jeff wants to know. Jeff, it's been a minute since I've seen Jeff, so let's grab one from Jeff. He says, how many picks have we already lost on quarterbacks? 2 firsts and 2 seconds if you move past Locke. That's a fair point in terms of the past, but you don't want to repeat the mistakes of the past, right? You want to learn from those mistakes and make better ones in the present.
And we're not advocating either. I mean, we think it may be premature. As amazing as Deshaun Watson is, but to prematurely give up on Drew Lock when he might have turned in his best performance as a pro in Week 17, I want to see a little more of what he brings to the table at a much, much cheaper cost.
All right, I'm just checking something here. All right. Ariel, good to see you. Hope you and your better half are doing. I wouldn't say better half. You're, in my case, my wife. She's definitely the better half. But I hope you two are doing okay. It's good to see you. She says, "How can we connect via email since we don't have a Twitter?" Thanks. You can email us anytime. milehighhuddle@gmail.com. We will reply. We're happy to reply and engage. So, but our advice, Zach, is get a Twitter account. Yeah. It's free. It doesn't cost you anything, and you can connect with the people you want to connect. And again, that's another way to keep the conversation going, because as great as email correspondence is, it's a two-way. It's limited to kind of 2 ways, right? Whereas on Twitter, you might throw a question at myself or Zach or something. I'll reply, and then maybe someone else from the community jumps in, like Richie or anybody else, and then Zach might jump in. That's one of the fun components to social media and specifically Twitter, although right now with everything going on in our country, it's a little bit toxic. So make sure the people you do follow, are within a sphere that you really want to be in.
Avoid politics at all costs. Little pro tip there.
Mr. Boggins, appreciate you, bro. He says, sorry, you guys have to acknowledge this rumor. And he doesn't say that because I'm sure, I don't mean to speak for Boggins here, but I doubt he's saying that because he doesn't think Watson is awesome. He's probably saying that because it's just not in the realm of reality or likelihood.
I don't see Houston trading him. I mean, that's my official prediction. I don't think he's going anywhere, but crazier things have happened.
All right, let me see here real quick. I need to pull one or two off of the back end here, Zach. So I'm gonna see if I can find one right quick. Well, here's Dave. Got to say hi to Dave. Dave from Georgia. Good to see you, brother. Appreciate that super chat. He says, hashtag Denver Broncos for life, hashtag state of being. Yeah, you exemplify that state of being every single day, my friend. We love you. We appreciate you. Zach, this is from Marcus, who's been giving us stars tonight as well. He says, haven't you got to pay our players first before maybe putting us in debt for years to come, or for years on some QB that still may not work? Let's just set aside for a second all the compensation and all that. Do you have any doubts about Deshaun Watson as far as the player himself coming out of 2020 that was fairly lackluster for him and, the Texans.
I'm a big Deshaun Watson fan. I think he's incredible. I mean, he was on my fantasy team that I won a championship with. So I'm a big fan of Deshaun Watson, and he's first entering his prime, elite quarterback. As a player, no qualms.
All right, we do have Kenneth Booker in the house, and I'm going to pull one of his super chats right now and throw it up here on the screen. Always good to see Kenneth. And by the way, Kenneth, I did just get notified that we officially, somehow along the way, when we sent out your mug, it did get sent officially to South Korea. I was hoping that was a typo, but I think it was my fault. Somewhere along the line, I missed the drop down or something. And instead of saying the United States, apparently your address, which I will not disclose here live on the interwebs, there must be some kind of match in South Korea because the system didn't go, whoa, what are you doing? This doesn't exist. But nevertheless, I'm just going to go ahead and send you the one that's right here behind me. It's behind these books here. So I'll look for that in the coming days. But Kenneth, he says, with O'Brien, we could have got Watson for James. Yeah, it's too bad.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, that's also a big reason why. As weird as Nick Caserio is, if you've ever looked at his mugshot, Chad, he has weirder eyes than base Gase, his profile picture. They're bug eyes completely. And even he has to know the value of a franchise cornerstone in Deshaun Watson. So, yeah, it's too bad BOB's gone.
All right, let me grab Cody here, and I'm going to read from the back end because it's too long for one individual banner that we can show. Really appreciate you, Cody. I mean, every single pod, for the most part, you're in the stream. You're showing us love on Super Chat. So, you're a guy that I think we need to say a little thank you to Cody Potter because he's just been diligent and just outgoing. So, Cody, we'd like you to reach out to us. Hit us up on email. Send us an email, milehighhuddle@gmail.com. Let us know your T-shirt size. Let us know your address, and we want to send you out a little thank you for your support over the last year and a half. But Cody says, it's not realistic to get Watson. We need to get younger on defense. Been looking at the next 2 years drafts, and me being a North Dakota fan, Kyle Hamilton at strong safety would look great in Fangio's system. Experts compare him to Harrison Smith or to be the next Harrison Smith. Yeah, I mean, I'm not perfectly familiar with him, but the Broncos definitely need to get some depth because at safety. Because, Zach, regardless of what happens with Justin Simmons, even if you get him re-signed, still you're looking at a hole, even in the best-case scenario, next to him after 2021, Kareem Jackson, this is the final year of his deal, and I'll be surprised, honestly, if he ends up playing this year on last year of his deal in Denver. Behind him, who do you got? Trey Marshall, Duke Dawson. You got to find some safety depth.
That's what I was going to say. I mean, Simmons is a free agent, regardless of his, what he wants to do, what the Broncos want to do. Jackson's getting up there, and you can make the case he should be a cut. They don't have a third safety. Will Parks isn't signed beyond this season. Who is going to be their magical bullet there? Elijah Holder, Trey Marshall. They need a safety. So that's what we're saying. As amazing as Deshaun Watson is, the Broncos aren't a Watson away from winning a title. They have holes throughout this roster.
All right, we got one here from Dale Rude. Good to see you, my friend. He says, Kenneth Booker's super chats are just as entertaining as Chad and Zach. Yeah, we are as entertained as you are. Trust. We love hearing from Kenneth, and he's in every single chat, whether it's Huddle Up Pod, whether it's Building the Broncos, any of the other shows. So, yeah, Kenneth's in the Hall of Fame for sure.
KB is that dude, 100%.
Duke Boynton jumping in again. Gosh, thanks, buddy. He says, my wish list. He also had a hashtag, so let me flip over real quick. My wish list brings in Oliver Luck as the Broncos GM. He single-handedly made the XFL relevant before the 19 hit. Bring in Andrew Luck to push Drew Lock, hashtag Luck, Lock, and Loaded. Man, say that 3 times fast. But yeah, I mean, I don't think that's really on the radar. I think he's more administrative guy. He's more of like a commissioner, Oliver Luck. I know he's got some experience in front offices over the years from what I can remember off the top of my head with his resume, but might be a tinfoil hat way, Zach, of trying to figure out how to get Andrew Luck out of retirement, but I don't think that's happening.
I can't tell you how many times after the Broncos drafted Luck, I mean, Drew Lock and Andrew Luck, how many times I mix and match the two. I did read some speculation that the Colts still have his rights, and Rivers, his future is murky there. So I read some loose rumors that he can come back to Indianapolis, but Denver, nah.
And I got to say, as much as I used to really hate Phillip Rivers, the old Phillip, not to say that he's changed, but because he's pretty much always been the same guy, but I'm talking like Cutler era in Denver version of Phillip Rivers. Man, I hated that guy. And it was really cool to see Jay Cutler and Phillip Rivers back in the day. They had a nice little rivalry going because they would jaw at each other on the field. And so over the years, though, I just came to really respect Phillip Rivers for what he does. And, a lot of wins in San Diego and LA, but it never culminated in much success in terms of, the playoffs. So I'm really happy for him. He's that team, even though I don't expect him to go the distance. That's my emotional soft spot in this year's playoffs is the Colts, and then also the Browns. I'd like to see some good things happen for the Browns. Considering Bills. That neither of those two teams are going to make it, it's probably going to be the Bills that I'm rooting for, Zach.
Yeah, I mean, considering the wide right, considering their Super Bowl history and all that, I would love to see that city, one of the best fan bases in the NFL, Chad. I'd love to see them have some success for sure.
Especially after that 4, not 1, not 2, 4 consecutive trips to the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And this should have at least been 1 and 3, right? If Scott Norwood doesn't dunk or dink that kick. Chase Wellner, good to see you, bro. Appreciate you. He says, we're a better roster than Houston right now. But for how long if you sell the future? Watson has proven this year that you can't win with just a QB. Yes, and what I'll also say to kind of build on that is Watson has proven this year that you can't win with just him at QB because, we saw Peyton Manning absolutely carry some horrendous Indianapolis Colts rosters over the years, over his 15 seasons in Indy. So, that's why they say that a true bona fide franchise guy is the tide that raises all ships. And I don't want to, I don't want to jump to too many conclusions because even Peyton had some down years and even some of the best, look at Aaron Rodgers. He's had some forgettable years because of some, tomfoolery at coach and some bad decisions at GM and whatnot. So I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole in terms of, writing the book on Deshaun Watson, but the point remains. He wasn't enough to keep the ship afloat this year when things went off the rails, and those were two really bad examples there. But nevertheless, Watson, I like him, but I'm not selling the farm.
And think of, though, I mean, you can't even use the excuse, we had no talent around him in Houston and the Broncos have the better roster. Look what you had on Houston's offense last year. You had Brandon Cooks, you had Randall Cobb, you had Kenny Stills, you had Will Fuller, you had David Johnson, you had Duke Johnson. You have talent on that team surrounding Jordan Akins, the tight end. He was loaded there, but why wasn't Houston a playoff team? Why were they so bad this year? He can't play defense. He can't protect himself. He can't play offensive line. You can't win with, as good as a quarterback may be, you can't win with just the quarterback. That's the entire point here.
We got Dustin MW jumping in. Thank you for that super chat, my friend. He says, just wanted to pop by and say hello. Always love watching y'all. Well, we really do appreciate that. Yeah. Thank you, Dustin. Mayola on YouTube jumping in on Super Chat. Thank you. Wow, really appreciate that generosity, my friend. He says, this one is for Ivan. JK. Been watching for 3 years. Figured I'd give some money for all the hours in my mornings. Also, how would you all, let me go back to the back end. How would you all feel about drafting Trey Lance? Nice QB battle. Thanks for the grind. God bless. Really appreciate that, my friend. And you know what? Even if it's not on Super Chat, be in the live chat more. We want to hear from you. We want your takes. We want your opinions. So welcome and stick around on the live shows because it sounds like you listen after the fact, which is great. We're not poo-pooing that, but this is where the conversation's at, my dog. But what are your thoughts on Trey Lance, Zach?
He kind of scares me as there's always like one Paxton Lynch prospect in every draft class, and I really don't want that guy. I want more of a sure thing. But I was wrong on the last guy that I thought met that criteria, and that was Josh Allen and Justin Herbert to an extent as well. He had a lot of bust potential to me, and he proved me wrong this season. It depends on, again, what the Broncos want to do at quarterback. For Locke, he lost a big supporter in Elway when he decided to resign his position, and the new GM supposedly will have final say and full authority to build the roster the way he sees fit. I still think Locke gets first dibs, but even if he doesn't, I really don't see Denver investing in a first-round quarterback unless someone, maybe like Zach Wilson or Fields, fell into their laps at number 9 overall.
Agreed. WE, good to see you, my friend. Thank you, as always, for your consistent. This is a bona fide superstar right here. WE, though, you should come connect on Twitter. It'd be fun to keep the conversation going with you on Twitter as well. But he says, why aren't we taking a serious look at John Dorsey, Rick Smith, or Thomas Dimitroff? I would rather have an experienced GM steady the ship than take a risk. It's a fair question because none of the guys that they've lined up for interviews have been a GM before. So, look, John Dorsey to me would be the ultimate get because he was the guy that built the Chiefs that you see, obviously with a lot of input and power sharing with Andy Reid over there, but he also was the brainchild between the Cleveland Browns' very short-term rebuild. He's a guy that I have a lot of respect for. But this is not because of some of the little peccadillos of the Broncos' particular situation with ownership, with John Elway still kind of being a figurehead for at least the next year. This is a job he's not going to take, even if it was on the table. Rick Smith, I could see because of his past connections with Elway and the Broncos. Dimitroff, wouldn't surprise me to see him take a year off and kind of, just disconnect for a little bit. But Dimitroff, Zach, is one of the few ex-Patriots, all right, that expats, I guess I can say, that actually went on to have measurable, quantifiable success outside of the New England cocoon. And for those of you who are going, who's Thomas Dimitroff? Former, recently relieved of duties, GM of the Atlanta Falcons. He built some pretty good teams over the years. Coaching never could quite get him over the hump there, but Dimitroff and Scott Pioli, very short term, what he did in Kansas City, but really, I only look at Dimitroff as the only guy who left Bill Belichick's cocoon, went on to have anything close to success.
Yeah, I'm not that crazy about Dimitroff. I believe once Kyle Shanahan left that organization, the whole thing went to crap. Did Dorsey overlap with Pat Shurmur as head coach? I'd like to know that because obviously there's a familiarity there. And the point I'm trying to make in that is he's not even on the radar right now, John Dorsey, but I wouldn't want a guy for the same reason I didn't want Pat Shurmur being twice fired. I don't want a guy in John Dorsey who is, you could say failed with the Chiefs and failed with the Browns now. I'd rather an up-and-comer. Rick Smith, it makes a lot of sense. If you would go all in on Deshaun Watson, he drafted Watson. I mentioned that. He traded up for him in 2017, a fairly blockbuster deal at a time when he was drawing criticism for that. But he's not on the radar either. I think you nailed it, Chad. None of the candidates have prior GM experience. They want someone that's going to grow into the position for years to come.
And honestly, I don't read into that in the same way that I read into why one of the driving forces behind the hire of Vance Joseph, which is, let's face it, Elway was coming off the 2016 year, the last year of Kubiak, in which there really was a power struggle that was going on between what the shot caller in the front office wanted to see on the field. Anyone who's ever seen Moneyball, right? You see those scenes where Brad Pitt, of course, portraying Billy Beane as the GM of the A's, the Oakland A's, is trying to strong arm the manager, right? We'll say the head coach, to play his guys based on this Moneyball system that he and his guy are developing and whatnot. And the coach just doesn't give in. He doesn't budge. And Billy Beane gets to the point where he's like, screw it. I'm just going to trade the guys you want to play over my guys, leave you no options but to play my guys. John Elway went through a kind of similar struggle. I don't want to be too dramatic here, but he wanted Paxton Lynch on the field in 2016, and Kubiak fought him the whole way. And so I think that was something that very much informed the decision to go after VJ as a first-time head coach, as a new guy, as a learn-on-the-job guy, and a yes man, a guy that would do what John Elway said to do each and every. I mean, think about that when TJ Ward was traded. That day, he was standing up there at the podium, VJ, talking about the issues of practice and the opponent. It was right on the doorstep of the season. And he said, hey, he was asked about TJ Ward being traded. And he's like, yeah, that would be bad. We want to keep our good players. He didn't even know. He wasn't even consulted, and it had already hit the wire. So that's getting back to this point is you look for an experienced guy for obvious reasons. But in the Broncos case, I don't necessarily think that they're going GM because they want a yes man. I think they're going with a first-time GM in this case, Zach, because they want a guy who's got a fresh outlook, that's hungry, that's energized, that is hungry. That's the word. That's the one I'm going to stick with, a hungry guy.
And Fangio touched on that. He mentioned a fresh set of eyes coming in to diagnose Locke and diagnose the roster, and I believe that's what it is as well. He won't be a puppet. He won't be a yes man. The new GM, whoever it may be, is going to have more power consolidated than a lot of people realize.
Muhammad wants to know on Super Chat, thanks, bro, by the way. He says, when does the Beast returns from vacay, and when does Kelberman's Corner, when does the show start? So John will be gone. I think he'll be back first of next week is what I remember him saying. So a couple more days. He might even be back Sunday. I don't remember for sure. I'd have to look at that. But, yeah, he'll be back soon. So don't worry about that. As far as Kelberman Corner, that starts Sunday at noon Mountain Time, 2 p.m. Eastern, only on our Facebook supporters group. So it's not going to be on our Facebook page where everyone can see it. It's only going to be in our official supporters group. So that's Sunday at noon. And if you want in on that, just go to the page, subscribe to become a supporter, and you'll be right there when we hit the go live button.
I'll make it worth your while, guys. I promise you.
Trust. All right, let's grab a couple more here. We're about to cross the 1 hour mark, so we got to kind of rapid fire. This Mile High Mailbag, you guys never cease to amaze us. Great questions, great support. I mean, we do pride ourselves on being your football priest. We love taking a look inside the mailbag, seeing what's on your mind. And really, our mailbag has turned into almost every single pod the way we've formatted these shows. But, we're here to help you exorcise the demons and provide the absolution and answers to your burning Broncos questions. But Chris jumping in again, Blue Raw on YouTube to say, not sure if y'all saw the video of J.J. Watt apologizing to D. Watt for wasting a season of his career. I could see JJ getting moved by the Texans. I haven't seen that. So if you have, Zach, elucidate.
I've been addicted to the NFL films, mic'd up videos every week the past couple weeks. And yeah, they were walking off the field after last Sunday's game, and JJ goes up to him and goes, "I'm sorry." And Deshaun's like, "For what?" And JJ's like, "We wasted one of your years." And what he means is we wasted one of your prime years. And for someone, a future Hall of Famer in J.J. Watt, to say that and to say it with such sincerity and such sorrow, it touched me to an extent. And he really was apologetic because Deshaun was the only bright beacon of that franchise last year. And you can really argue the last, 3-4 years.
Pro careers are finite. And, quarterbacks, if they're good enough, their shelf life can last a little bit longer in the league, obviously. But when they're in their prime, it really is a sin, Zach, to waste when they've popped and they've arrived to waste one of those years.
Broncos should know with Von Miller.
True that. Mark Anthony jumping in again. Thank you, my friend. He says, QB options I'd be cool with. Stick with Locke and pray. Trade up for Zach Wilson and fall in love. Trade for Deshaun Watson, wait for glory or hellfire. Y'all been my – hold on, let me go back and find that. Y'all been my favorite pod for years now. Hashtag appreciative.
Thank you,
really
Mark.
Appreciate that, brother. Really appreciate that. Look, I don't think the Broncos end up moving off of Drew, but that's going to still be highly contingent dependent on this new GM.
Yeah, that's all we can say for now. Whatever the new GM, we'll have more information on speculation about Locke's future when we know who that guy is going to be, hopefully soon.
All right, let me just see where we're at here on the back end. Let me do a quick refresh while we grab Jay. Appreciate you, Jay. He says, number 4, better than number 7. All right, so is I think what he's saying is Watson better than Elway? Heck no. Elway needed a team to win 2 Super Bowls. Locke, drafting, coaching equals success. Build the team with the draft, Locke, and time. That's the path to success. And I don't disagree with the premise. I think, the Broncos have put in a lot of the blood, sweat, and tears to go through the necessary roster changes and shift from being an old, outdated offense to a young, potentially dynamic offense. And you're just on the cusp, on the precipice of reaping the rewards for that. But you got to stick it out just a little bit longer with Locke. Now, there's always the chance that you could just say, no, we want it now. We don't want to chance it. We want to inject this. We want to caffeinate this thing. We're moving on, and we're going for Zach Wilson at pick 9 in the draft because we think he can step in day 1 and be farther ahead day 1 than Drew Lock would be in, start 20 something. I'm not sure I would agree with that. But it could happen. I think it's going to be Locke.
That's always been my thing, though. I've been wanting the Broncos to find their own young quarterback and build their own young quarterback and him turn out to be the next Deshaun Watson or the next Kyler Murray, the next Burrow, the next Patrick Mahomes, whatever, whether that be Locke or Zach Wilson, whoever else. I'm tired of taking other teams' quarterbacks who they've developed and trying to win with them. I want the Broncos to draft that guy. And not only that, if you go that route with Locke or another person, he would be so much cheaper contractually than Deshaun Watson, and you save those draft picks. There's no downside, Chad, assuming you hit on the guy and have the right coaches around him to building from within with your own quarterback.
All right, we got a few more here that I got to reverse engineer. Bear with me just 1 second. People want to get things off their chest, issues, topics, questions. So we might be on a few minutes longer than usual here, but we're happy to do it. Jesse, appreciate you, my friend. He says, I don't know about anybody else, but after the pandemic year, I get nervous when people start screaming trade here and there. Can't we just take a breath first? I feel you on that. But here's the thing, man. That's one of the things I think we all love about the offseason is the possibilities, the speculation. And I love this aspect of it.
And I think the second part of that comment answers the first part. You know, with the pandemic and how things have been the last however many months now, it's felt like, 5 years, but people are cooped up. People have been cooped up. People are going stir crazy. People look and turn to football and plug into football, Chat, and the Broncos as their source and as their daily almost motivation, their daily zen. So I understand where all this conjecture is coming from and the speculation. It's that time of year right now. It's speculation season, and I think the pandemic only heightened that after 2020.
Ron Dubb in the house. Talk about a superstar. Love you, my friend. Appreciate it. It's always great to see you in the chat. Brings the good questions. He says, hey, guys, which in-house free agents do you believe the new GM will retain? Man, it is so hard to say until we know who it's going to be. And even once we know who it's going to be, it doesn't mean we're going to automatically know how they're going to view these respective free agents. But, obviously, first and foremost, the priority that has to at least be either resolved or moved off the board is Justin Simmons. What are you going to do there? I think whoever the next GM is would be remiss to let him go at this stage, even knowing that you're going to have to pay him some top 5 safety money. But I think it's also going to be in part informed, that particular decision, Zach, on how that GM views Kareem Jackson contract year. If that GM comes in, because part of what these interviews are going to be is if, Zach and I, these are going to be done, the initial ones on Zoom. They're going to say, hey, one of the questions anyway for Champ Kelly is going to be, Champ, our roster. You saw our team this year. What are our weaknesses? Where are our strengths? Where are the glaring holes that we need to fill? What do we need to do? And how they answer that. So at this point, though, we just don't know how that's viewed. Obviously, from the surface, it's evident that Simmons is a talented player and that needs to get resolved. But whoever that guy is, might not want to pay top dollar.
And if it is someone like Champ Kelly, and that's why we're saying when we have the guy in place, we'll have a better picture of what coaches are going to stay, what players are going to stay, where they're going to lean. But someone like Champ Kelly coming from Chicago, they paid Eddie Jackson. They invested in his safety. That's one example. That might give you an indication what they want to do with Justin Simmons. But to your point, Chad, there's no guarantee either that no matter who it is, if they even want to keep Simmons, that Simmons accepts the Broncos offer. His comments in his season-ending presser really led me to believe, I'm not saying it's a certainty, but a lot of goodbye vibes in what he was saying. And if he wants he turned down 14, 15 mil, is Denver going to go higher than that, no matter who's GM? I don't know. I don't know about that. A lot of speculation.
I would prioritize it, though. Just the last thing for you, Ron. I would go Simmons. I would go Shelby. As far as the unrestricted guys, who am I missing? Shelby. You
could say a tackle like Dotson or Wilkinson, but those were down the list.
Wilkinson, I'm letting him hit the bricks. But, there's the RFA guys.
Those are no-brainers.
I'm probably letting Jarrell Casey go. I'm probably letting AJ Bouye go, depending on, my research, my scouting department. What are they telling me is available in free agency at cornerback in those different positions? But if I re-sign Shelby, I don't necessarily need Jarrell Casey in 2021. Zach.
Yeah, and DeMarcus Walker, I saw a comment. Those are all the periphery guys, though. You got to take care of Simmons, and then it goes Shelby Harris, and then maybe the Lindsey, the Patricks, tender those guys and work your way down. and figure out Von Miller at outside linebacker, what you want to do with his contract.
Yep. Because even though Von's not a free agent, it's an option year. So the Broncos do have a decision to make, and a decision will be made. All right, we really do got to move this along. Willie G, again, thank you, my friend. He says, if anything, Deshaun Watson is a highlight on how important coaching is. Very true, Zach.
Yes, it's coaching makes all the difference. I've been preaching this ad nauseum for 3 years now. Coaching.
All right, let me see here. We got the Princess of MHH checking in, being generous, top rope, as she so often does. Thank you, Poppy. And by the way, a little something, I think some of the guys may have gotten their stuff. I know Zach's is still in transit. He should be getting it any day. Everyone's excited. I don't want to spill too many other beans, but she says, thanks for all you guys do. Thanks for what you do, Poppy.
Bobby, I actually did get mine yesterday. I've been wanting to. I'm gonna post it on Twitter still because it's unbelievable. I actually have. I don't know if you can see. I have the calendar behind me that you sent. I don't want to give everything away in case any other podcasters watching hasn't opened it up. But Bobby, it touched me completely. The heartfelt, the love that you put into what you sent us and what you share with us, the gifts that we receive because of you is completely amazing. I just want to say thank you so much and look out for a very, very grateful tweet tomorrow.
MJL Productions jumping in, a name we don't recognize, so welcome and thank you. We really do got to move it along, though. He says, hey, guys, love the show. Thank you. We love you, too. Would the Broncos be dumb to pass up on Justin Fields at 9 if he is there? I think so. I'm not sure, man. I mean, look, if the Broncos didn't have, let's say Drew Lock wasn't on this roster, my answer to you would be yes, they'd be dumb. But I'm still not sold. I know he had that great game, and I know he's done a lot of phenomenal things at Ohio State. Google it, all right? Guys, after this show, Google Ohio State quarterbacks in the league. You're not going to find one that's had any success. And so maybe eventually there's going to be an exception that proves the rule. And perhaps it's Justin Fields, but I'm telling you, that makes me so gun shy to take a look at Justin Fields, as dynamic as he is.
And then Google USC quarterbacks. That's why I want nothing to do with Sam Darnold in a potential trade or a veteran signing. Yet Fields, he had a good performance in the bowl game. I don't think he's escaping the top 5, and he's not my quarterback 1 or even the quarterback 2 in this draft class. I don't know that I would take him if he fell to that pick.
Kenneth wants to know, what's your favorite away stadium to visit? Haven't been to all that many away stadiums, but, I mean, Jerry World is about as impressive as it gets. That.
Yeah, I can speak personally. I covered a game when I was in college. I covered a game at Raymond James Stadium, and that is such a cool place, at least in the press box and how they do it there. It's an older stadium, but there's a lot of life in there. The big cannons, the view of the palm trees in South Florida, or not South Florida, but, Tampa. It's a really nice stadium. For sure.
Mark, I think, is wondering about becoming a Facebook supporter. Is it a paid subscription? Yes. I think it's $5, and you're in like Flynn and access to the Kelberman's Corner shows. And that's just going to be the tip of the iceberg. We're just getting started on doing Facebook content to cater to our Facebook community. But yeah, it's $5. I think it's monthly, if I'm not mistaken. All right, we really gotta hustle through. My lappy's about to die, and I just realized again I left my freaking charger in the other room. Josh, appreciate you, bro. He says, there's no way we should pass up on Deshaun if we can, right? Wrong. It really comes down to what the compensation is, my friend.
Yeah, there is a way. And if they want, 5 first-round picks, I'm sorry. I can't do that.
Yeah, it's a no-go zone at that stage. But I'm just looking here, making sure we aren't missing anybody. I'm going to take one last glance here on the back end, because sometimes that reveals somebody out in the that we might have passed up on accidentally. No, I think we're good. So, gang, thank you so much for spending some time with us here tonight. A mile high salute to our Super Chat superstars, our Facebook supporters, those of you on Facebook giving us stars. I mean, it all is just so meaningful for us, and it all adds up and makes a huge difference. Follow the pod on Twitter at HuddleUpPod. The main account at Mile High Huddle. By the way, comments are back at milehighhuddle.com. So those of you who are having withdrawals of commenting for the last day and a half, they are back. It's a little bit different widget, so you got to create a new login, but you'll be fine. It takes 15 seconds. You're in like Flynn. And then my partner, follow him on Twitter, Zack Kelberman at Kelberman NFL. Myself at Chad and Jensen, and our producer John K, who is on vacay, at John K. MHH. He'll be back next week, as we mentioned. So, and again, become a supporter on Facebook if you want. This is our last opportunity, ourselves anyway, to talk to everybody before that episode. So, guys, go to Facebook right now, /Mile High Huddle, to our page. You'll see the blue button to become a supporter. Sunday at noon, Kelberman's Corner. It's going to be a gas. So, Zach, have a great finish to your week, and I think we'll start getting some vibes on the GM thing, on the search and who starts emerging for sure. They want the final 1 or 2 interviews to be in person early next week. This thing's going to move quick.
Yeah, I've been asked on Twitter when this will be wrapped up, and I think by this time next week for sure we will have a new GM in place, and maybe by Sunday's episode, Chad, we'll have a front runner, so we'll have to keep an eye on the newswire. Look forward to Kelberman's Corner. It's going to be interesting, guys. Anyone who likes the old spit and vinegar, the dragon type, like Muhammad would say, is going to like this. And it's just like Chad said, we have so many more things coming in 2021. That is just the start. But thank you guys so much. We'll see you Sunday. And as always, go Broncos.
Thanks, Muhammad, for the sticker. Real quick, on the way out the door. Love you, buddy.
You've been listening to the Huddle Up Podcast. Join Broncos Country's deep divers at milehighhuddle.com to keep the conversation going.